In 1999, a mysterious disappearance occurred in the United States that still haunts people's minds to this day. An 11-year-old girl was left alone for 90 seconds and disappeared. Years later, the police would find a banknote with the words "I'm alive" written on the girl's behalf. Mikelle was born on May 31, 1987, the eldest of four Biggs children. The family lived in a seemingly quiet area of Mesa, Arizona. For her sisters and brother, Mikelle was the embodiment of the word perfect. In 1999, she was 11 years old and in the 6th grade. The girl studied exclusively with excellent grades, drew very well, and already at such a young age said that when she grows up, she will become an animator and work at Disney. On January 2, 1999, two sisters, 11-year-old Mikelle and 9-year-old Kimber, were playing outside with their dog and taking turns riding their new bike. They were in their neighborhood near the intersection of Southern Avenue and Gilbert Road. It was getting dark and the streets looked empty on a Saturday night. At one point, the girls heard the music of an ice cream truck approaching. The girls hurried home to ask their mother for money for ice cream and then returned to the street. However, the ice cream truck was nowhere to be found, and the girls began to wait. At one point, Kimber felt cold and told her sister that she would run into the house to get a jacket and would be back. Mom told Kimber that the ice cream vendor would come another time, and then asked her to go back to the street and tell Mikelle to come inside already. When she returned, Mikelle was no longer there. Her bike was lying on the road, its wheels still spinning. Next to it were 2 coins that the girl had prepared for buying ice cream. Kimberly began to look around and shout her sister's name, hoping that Mikelle had just decided to play a joke on her and hid. The girl never showed up, so Kimber went home and told her mother that she couldn't find Mikelle. Tracy and Kimber went to the Millers, who were their neighbors and friends. But when they knocked on their door and asked if they had seen Mikelle, they just shook their heads. One of the Millers' sons was a good friend of Mikelle's and was worried about her, so he volunteered to help Kimber search. By the time the police arrived, about 60 people, neighbors and acquaintances, were already looking for Mikelle. The police searched everywhere: garbage containers, vacant lots, sewers, and questioned every ice cream vendor in the state, and were unable to establish that even one of them was in the area at the time of the girl's disappearance. Detectives reconstructed the chronology of events and came to a terrible conclusion. The girl disappeared in just 90 seconds. It was the spinning wheel on the bicycle that confirmed the fact that the abduction happened extremely quickly. Search dogs could not pick up the girl's scent, and when they did, they took only a few steps towards the road. The fact is that a dog picks up a person's scent only if the missing person left on their own 2 feet. This only supported the main version of the police. The girl was put in a car and taken away, and all this in a matter of seconds. The situation was complicated by the complete absence of witnesses. Even though the girls were playing on a street filled with houses, none of the neighbors saw them that evening. With fewer and fewer clues, the police began to work on standard theories. When a child goes missing, parents and other relatives are always checked. Considering that Mikelle's mother was at home at the time of the abduction, investigators turned to the girl's father, Darian Biggs. The reason for suspicion was his lie about what he was doing when his daughter disappeared. Darian initially claimed that he was late at work when his wife called him and told him that Mikelle had escaped. In fact, he was not there. It would later turn out that Darian was indeed at work in some sense, since he was with his mistress, who was also his boss. What's even more interesting is that the man failed a lie detector test. His wife admitted that she knew about Darian's infidelities. He himself told her about this a month before the incident. His wife was thinking about divorce. Despite the false alibi, the police eventually stopped considering the father as a suspect. Even if they divorced, his wife had no plans to stop him from seeing his children. He simply had no motive. In addition, detectives acknowledged that the lie detector results could have been influenced by the emotional state of the father, whose daughter had just been kidnapped. He may even have placed some of the blame on himself and thought that if he had been at home with his family, the tragedy could have been avoided. Detectives later said that Mikelle most likely did not know her abductor. If it was her father, she would not have thrown the bike and changed on the ground. The girl tried to run away from the stranger, but simply did not have time. During the investigation, the police regularly had leads that led nowhere. An anonymous man called the detectives and said that Mikelle's body was on the territory of an abandoned factory in the outskirts of the city. The police arrived, but found nothing. Later, they received an email in which an anonymous person said that he was the one who abducted the girl. The FBI quickly tracked the IP address and sent a SWAT team to his home in Phoenix. It turned out that the sender was a 12-year-old boy who just decided to joke. Meanwhile, the police had reached a dead end, starting to process even the most unusual theories. They searched 35 abandoned gold mines in the area and then even questioned almost 500 psychics who supposedly could help the investigation. Of course, this led to nothing. One witness was found who saw a copper-colored Jeep shortly before Mikelle was kidnapped. The driver was quickly found, and he turned out to be innocent. After that, the police despaired of finding the girl because they literally had no clues left. This continued until September 27, 1999, when another shocking event shook the quiet county. A woman living near the Biggs returned home to find a middle-aged man with his trousers unzipped in the kitchen. He didn't say a word, but instead attacked the woman, choking her and assaulting her. The attacker then set fire to the house and left. The attacker apparently thought his victim was dead, but the woman survived. Her neck was broken, but she was able to reach the phone and call an ambulance. With her last strength, she whispered to the medics, "Mikelle Biggs, the girl who went missing. He took her. You have to save her." The whole town was talking about the Mikelle case again. The events unfolded quickly. The police arrested the assailant. It turned out to be D. Lee Blaylock, a man known in the area for being an alcoholic who lived with his wife and 3 children, who repaired cars and got into trouble with the law. His house was only 2 blocks from the Biggs. D. Lee Blaylock was one of the first to volunteer to help search for Mikelle and willingly let the police into the house to search, but not into the trailer in the backyard. He required a warrant for the trailer. You must admit, such behavior is extremely strange. A man with a bad reputation volunteers to help search for a missing girl, allows the police to search his house without any questions, and suddenly forbids them to look into the trailer. From then on, Blaylock became the prime suspect. Even though his wife provided him with an alibi for the time of Mikelle's abduction, no one believed her story. Most likely, she was simply afraid of her husband. Detectives began digging into Blaylock's past and discovered that he had 3 previous convictions for assault, harassment, and kidnapping. He was only released from prison in 1995, and at the time, none of the neighbors had any idea what kind of monster was living next door. Several times a week, Mikelle attended private piano lessons with a neighbor who lived across the street from Blaylock's house. This indicated that the man may have known the girl long before she disappeared. After Blaylock's arrest for assaulting a woman, the police came to his house again with a search warrant and planned to examine the trailer he had previously refused them entry to. But they were disappointed. The trailer had disappeared without a trace. This was a huge blow for Mikelle's parents. They were sure that their daughter was there, alive or not, but it was gone, and the police were unable to track it down. Blaylock was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the September 27, 1999, attack on a woman. He denied any involvement in Mikelle's disappearance. Admitting to kidnapping an 11-year-old girl could have sent him straight to the electric chair. The parents couldn't accept that their only hope for the truth was gone, so they decided to write a letter to the prison asking the main question. Was he involved in Mikelle's disappearance? The answer was shocking. He wrote that the conversation was too personal and suggested that the parents visit him in prison. At that moment, the parents once again hoped that Blaylock would confess, but they were in for a huge disappointment. Sitting opposite the criminal, the father asked if he had anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. Blaylock simply replied that he did not. The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, after which the criminal simply up and left, accompanied by guards. It looked as if he was simply teasing the parents, giving them false hope and destroying it by looking into their eyes. For a sadist like Blaylock, the suffering of others can bring unrivaled pleasure. For this reason, he apparently arranged a meeting with the grief-stricken parents. Afterwards, Father Mikelle confessed that he was convinced of Blaylock's involvement. He said, "I was sitting a few feet away from the guy who killed my daughter, and I couldn't do anything about it." At that point, even the most determined ones lost hope of solving the case. Absolutely everyone believed that new leads would never appear. Years later, they would realize they were wrong. On the 5th anniversary of Mikelle's disappearance, her parents buried an empty coffin, saying their final goodbyes to their daughter. During this time, their marriage had fallen apart. they had moved and were reluctant to talk to journalists. Until 2018, the case had been shelved. The police simply had nothing to work with. But then, unexpectedly for everyone, an event occurred that shook up all of America. On March 14th, 2018, a dollar bill was accidentally delivered to the police station in Neenah, Wisconsin. In clumsy handwriting, it read, "My name is Mikelle Biggs, kidnapped from Mesa. I am alive." The bill was found by a local resident who was collecting coins and dollar bills in a jar, and it was he who came across the dollar. He then reported the find to the police. The police immediately reopened the investigation. Mikelle's mother rushed almost 2,000 miles to look at the handwriting and see if the message was really written by her daughter. Other relatives also came to the station, but they all made a disappointing statement. The handwriting did not look like Mikelle at all, and the name was misspelled. The mother suggested that the bill could be someone's very unfortunate prank. Other relatives also supported this version. Despite this, the police tried to track the banknote. Unfortunately, it was almost impossible. Paper money changes owners so many times that it was impossible to find the author of this inscription. Experts who studied the banknote assumed that the inscription was made by an adult man who tried to imitate the handwriting of a child. Despite all this, the message on the paper banknote seems extremely suspicious. Could it be someone's prank? The chances that the police and relatives will find out about the banknote are extremely small. It could have been in circulation for years or even settled in a bank vault, and no one would have paid attention to it. The fact that it fell into the hands of a caring person who reported it to the police is more of a miracle than an inevitability. As for the handwriting, the most obvious version cannot be ruled out. Mikelle could have written in a hurry, afraid of being caught. In addition, she disappeared 9 years before the banknote appeared. If we assume that someone held her captive, did they give her the opportunity to write anything during this time? Over 9 years without practice, the handwriting could have changed. There is another question that no one knows the answer to. How long ago was this inscription made? The bill could have been in circulation for years, or it could have appeared shortly before it was discovered. It is worth remembering Blaylock, who was supposed to be released from prison in 2017. Perhaps he arranged this evil prank. It is enough to remember how he tormented the unfortunate parents, giving them false hope. We will never know all these questions, or this case will once again shock the world with unexpected details. Kimber, who last saw her older sister before she was kidnapped, still can't forget that horrible January evening. For a long time, she blamed herself for going home to get her jacket. But now she realizes that she would have been helpless against an adult kidnapper. Kimber is raising a young son to whom she constantly tells about his Aunt Mikelle. She calls her an angel who looks after him. The girl, like her entire family, is sure that Mikelle kidnapped Blaylock, but without evidence, it will never be possible to prove it, unless the criminal himself decides to confess in order to deal another blow to the missing girl's family. What do you think? Is there any hope that the inscription on the banknote was made by Mikelle herself and that she is still alive? Leave your guesses in the comments.